I believe we have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law, and the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this, require an exception to the filibuster for this action to deal with the Supreme Court decision.
That's President Biden today. Up until now, he wanted abortion to motivate his base in November, on the day that the abortion decision came down from the Supreme Court. He talked about you must get to the ballot box. Well, progressives, the progressive wing at least of his party, have taken a little bit more of a militant approach.
There are also actions at President Biden's disposal that he can mobilize.
That's right.
I'll start with the babiest of the babiest of the baby steps. Open abortion clinics on federal lands in red states right now. Let the states challenge. We have a federal clause, the clause that allows us to do that.
It also means asking the President of the United States to make abortion as available as possible with the tools he has, including medication abortion, including using federal lands as a place where abortions can occur.
Even the administration says that isn't going to happen. But as an election issue, abortion works for Democrats. The Washington Post points out 45% of U.S. voters say they now vote for a Democratic congressional candidate, the so-called generic ballot. Roughly 38% said Republican. That's a 7-point gap that has reportedly doubled in the last week. A number of other polls, as the Washington Post points out, say the same thing. Robert Patillo is here, civil rights attorney, radio host, great friend of the show. All right, I'm thinking about, say, Raphael Warnock's Herschel Walker race in Atlanta, Georgia. Does this explain how President Biden can be 15 or 20 points underwater in Georgia, and yet Raphael Warnock seems to still be ahead, if not ahead by double digits in the polls?
Well, that's part of it. Also, we have to look at the fact that President Trump went through the Republican Party during the primary season and picked literally the most cartoonish candidates to support. Dr. Oz, who 6 months ago was selling bootleg diet pills, the Senate candidate in Pennsylvania. J.D. Vance, whose only qualifications wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, the candidate in Ohio. Herschel Walker, who played football. He's the Republican nominee in Georgia, despite having a 20-year history of spousal abuse, holding a gun to a woman's head, has 12 personalities. And so that's why he's down 10 points. So I think what President Biden is trying to do is not upset the apple cart going into November. Now the Democrats have a little bit of momentum on their side. We're seeing gas prices decrease. We're seeing inflation not be on the front page anymore.
Okay, the idea being don't mess it up, right? All of a sudden, Democrats have been handed this gift. Suburban women who may have been angry about gas prices, now they look at abortion, especially in a red state like Georgia, and say, hey, this is now a single issue. Vote for me. There's a big wing of your party, though, who is as extreme as the people that you're talking about President Trump picked, but just on the other side. Take a listen to those who want abortion on demand.
Do you support any limitation on abortion, or do you think that women should have the right to have an abortion all the way up to 9 months?
I believe an abortion is a medical decision, and I believe that should be a choice made between a doctor and a woman, and in consultation with her family.
Are there any limits on abortion you would find appropriate?
I don't believe so, no. I believe that is between a woman and her physician, and it's certainly not between me or any politician.
My question was about any limits to abortion at any point. You know, late term, anything?
Look, you got to leave it up to the woman.
That's Tim Ryan. He's running against J.D. Vance, who you just mentioned. I've spent a lot of time in Ohio. That is not a state that believes in abortion on demand up until the time of birth. It just doesn't.
You're correct. And even in a state like Georgia, I'm a Southern Baptist, pro-life, pro-gun Democrat in this state. Those exist. So we're looking at somebody like Raphael Warnock. President Biden has to put him in the best position possible to be able to kind of string through that the eye of that needle. So this is why you hear Democrats not talking about the specifics of abortion, but rather talking about leaving it up to the woman, trusting a woman and her doctor to make the proper medical decisions for them, and keeping
by definition, don't you worry, though, that in a state like Georgia, somebody like a Raphael Warnock and Tim Ryan in Ohio, he's not leaving it out. He's saying there should be no restrictions. That's just not where America is. If that's what you have to be a Democrat, how's that any different than having to be an election denier to be a Republican?
Well, I think the point is the Democrats are saying that you leave the decision up to the woman and to her doctor. Those should be the limits placed on abortion. What is in the medical best interest and of the woman and the doctor? That the government does not belong in the medical room. The government does not make the decisions with regard to a woman's health. That is the line the Democrats are trying to push through. I think that is the best possible solution to the two issues versus Republicans who are now kind of backed into a corner. It's almost like when a dog chases a car. What do you do when he catches a car? The Republicans have been running on abortion for the last 30 years. Now they have it, and they have no idea what to do with it.
Well, they have it. They've got gun rights at the Supreme Court. They've got the EPA case today, huge win. They've got religious rights. So there's a lot of Republicans celebrating. You can make a great point. It's a lot easier to be running for something and for changing something than once you've already gotten it. Robert, it's good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thanks. Anytime.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.